and do some more walking as we're about to do right up the Via Condotti and this rather elegant shopping neighborhood that leads to the Piazza di Spagna and the Spanish Steps. So as you can see, Rome is a terrific city for walking. The Romans, too, conduct a lot of their life outdoors on the city streets, be it at a sidewalk cafe or a cellular telephone. But sometimes, if you want to go in a hurry, take the metro. One of the easy ways to get around Rome is by subway. Here we are at the subway station by the Spanish Steps, and we're going to show you how to do it, where to buy your ticket, and how to get on the train. So let's go ride the subways. Well, you walk into the station and down onto the platform, down the escalators where you buy your ticket. You can buy your subway tickets also in a tobacco stand out on the streets or down in the station. The stations generally have ticket booths that are open. Sometimes you'll find a surprise. You get down and the ticket booth is closed and you might have to come back up again and buy your ticket at a tobacco. But usually you can rely on the station ticket booth being open. And then if you're doing a round trip, you can buy 2 tickets at once to go out and to return. The train service is pretty frequent. About every 3 or 4 minutes, the new train pulls in, and just hop right on board. And we're going about 4 stops, and we'll be changing trains. And we're heading down towards the Colosseum, to St. Peter and James. And we'll let the people get off first, and then you get on. So we got off at Termini now, and we're going to change trains. We go from one line to the other line. In Rome, there's only 2 subway lines, so it's pretty easy to navigate and get around. And we change trains, and we'll be riding down towards the Colosseum. So if we were getting off the train and exiting out to the street, we'd go this way. But in this case, we're not going to exit. We're going to change trains, so we go over this way where it says line B, Linea B. So we go this way to change trains. So you get to the train platform and you wait around maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and soon enough your train arrives and takes you quickly on to the next couple of stops. We're just going down to Cavour. We're going to be visiting the statue of Moses, St. Peter and Chains Church, and then we'll be walking on to St. Clement's. So we're not traveling a very long distance, but still the subway is a handy way to get you there. Well, as the train arrives, you have to step back and let people get off first, and then you get on. And it's not crowded right now because we're not traveling in rush hour. In Rome, the rush hour is generally about 8 o'clock in the morning, more or less, and then about 6 o'clock in the evening. So we're in pretty good shape right now, not too crowded. Hang on. When the train's about to leave, you want to hang on to these posts here. That's it. You don't want to be caught on the ground. So we're going from Termini to Cavour. It's only 1 stop. We'll be there in a few minutes. If you forget where you're going, there's convenient maps on each subway car that have the routing and the names of the stations, so you can quickly find your way. The subway system here is very clean, and it's very safe, and it's quite modern. It was only built about 15 years ago, so it's really a comfortable way to get around the city. Yeah, where it says Passaggio Vietato, that means don't go in. This is an entrance to the subway. It's not an exit. You want to look for the exit, which says Uscita. Uscita is the exit. Uscita, that's what you want. And then you just walk out. You don't need a ticket to get out of here. You just walk right out the door. Okay. In each subway station, you'll find a neighborhood map. And also from the larger map of the system, you can see these 2 crossing red lines. Gives you a schematic view of where the subway goes. So that's our little subway ride. It shows how easy it is to get around on the Rome subway. And then you come out and you're up above ground. You're out in the open air and ready to find your way. Now you have to get oriented. Okay, I've come up out of the subway. Where am I? Well, just look around and get your bearings. We've come this distance to see the Church of St. Peter in Chains because of the famous statue by Michelangelo that it holds, the statue of Moses. It's a slightly out-of-the-way church. You do have to do some climbing to get there. Take the subway or take a bus or taxi, but if you want to see one of the greatest statues ever created, it's worth your visit. And here you'll find Moses. This was originally intended to be a monumental collection of 40 statues that would have been a freestanding funeral monument in the middle of St. Peter's to Pope Julius II. If it were completed, it would have been perhaps the greatest collection of sculptures ever created. As it stands, it's an unfinished masterpiece. Michelangelo did finish the Moses, and in itself it's one of the most powerful single sculptures that he ever created. And also he's reputed to have created the two saints on either side of Moses. The rest of this monument was completed by Michelangelo's students. But we can certainly see the hand of the master in the central figure of Moses. He's reputed to have hit the statue on the knee with a hammer and said, "Speak." It was so lifelike. Notice the bulging muscles and the veins and the flowing beard and the glower, and those horns are actually beams of light. Pope Julius died before the complex was completed, and the next pope pulled Michelangelo off the job and assigned him to paint the Last Judgment in the Sistine Chapel, which is probably the greatest painting ever done. So you can see it was hard for Michelangelo to try and do everything at once. To create the greatest sculpture and the greatest painting at the same time was just not possible. But we still have Moses here at St. Peter's in Chains. The church itself is quite impressive, with a vast nave and 20 columns lining each side of the nave. And right nearby are some ancient Roman ruins and modern Roman cats living in the ruins. Cats seem to thrive in these ruins because they're enclosed spaces that people are not allowed into to bother them. So it's their own wild kingdom. These brick ruins are ancient Roman remains located right next to the Colosseum, and reputedly they were changing rooms for the gladiators. We've come to this neighborhood to see another important church, the Basilica of San Clemente. This is a most unusual church because it has a Renaissance facade, a Baroque interior that you see here, highly decorated, with a Byzantine apse, and yet underneath this street level there's an early Christian basilica that dates back to about the year 600, and then beneath the Christian basilica, at the lowest level of this church, is an ancient Roman temple to the god Mithras. So San Clemente is quite unique in all of Rome in representing three main layers of religious history. With this beautiful Renaissance cloister at the street level, it's a very peaceful and charming church just at the surface level, and as you see in this diagram, it goes down and down. Now originally these church levels were not located in a basement. That was the early street level, and the surface level of ancient Rome was about 60 feet below what it is today. You're allowed to walk down into the ancient Roman level of this church, and it's quite an experience as you walk back in history to the lowest basement level, and you can see firsthand the surviving temple to the god Mithras. This lowest level dates back to the 2nd century, and it also contains parts of a palace of a Roman patrician and some catacombs. Here's the temple to Mithras, and we see some household implements lying about. Mithras was a competing religious cult to early Christianity, so this site is of extreme importance in the history of religion and the development of the Catholic Church in Rome. And a most pleasant place it is, just 2 blocks behind the Colosseum. And then we're back on our way back into the heart of town. It's easy to jump in a taxi and only costs a few dollars to go from one side of town to the other, because Rome is a fairly compact city, and when you've just got 3 days in a place, you don't want to spend a lot of time walking vast distances to get across town or trying to figure out what public bus to take. So we're in the taxi, making our way speedily up the Corso. Not as quick as if we were on a scooter, but much safer. We're coming back to the neighborhood of the hotel, to the Via Condotti, for some more adventures in just strolling around. The passeggiata is one of the great traditions in Italy, which means just going out for a stroll at about 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night, working up an appetite, doing a little more shopping. The stores close for siesta until about 3:30, and then they reopen from generally 3:30 till about 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night. So it's a fine time for just walking around and people watching, joining the parade. So we're strolling in the neighborhood of the Via Condotti, Spanish Steps. There's our hotel plaza on the Corso. Other streets that intersect in a rectangular grid pattern here, filled with shops, include Via Borgognona, Via Fratina, Via della Vite, and Via della Croce. There are several other hotels in this convenient neighborhood, including the Hotel Inglaterra, the Hotel Cariage, and atop the Spanish Steps, the very famous and expensive Hotel Hassler. A lot of shops and restaurants, ice cream stores, snack shops, music stores. It's a passionate place. Whether you're a Roman or a visitor, you get swept up in the romance of this great city. You'll find Italians have a great love of life, they love food, they love fashion, and they love each other. And you too will fall in love with Rome if you ever get there. And if you have been there, you know what we're talking about. It's an incredible place. Of all the cities that I've visited throughout Europe, Rome still climbs right back up to the top as a place that offers the visitor everything: history, architecture, contemporary life, food, good shopping values, interesting people, friendly faces. Just a fabulous place. And now it's time to move on to our next destination, which is Florence, the Renaissance capital of the world. It's easy to get to the train station. It's a large modern building constructed in the 1950s in kind of a industrial warehouse modern style. And we soon find ourselves on a train platform ready to board. We travel by train from Rome to London. We take 18 days to get there, visiting half a dozen cities along the way, and generally stay about 2 or 3 days in each city that we visit. What did you think of Rome?
What did I think of Rome? I think it's we spent many years in developing the architecture and the engineering that goes into making the city as unique as it is today, and find it rather unique with the unorganized traffic patterns and streets, narrow streets that tend to surprise you when you're coming around a corner or a turn, and lo and behold, you have this beautiful fountain or church that you would never otherwise anticipate, simply because the buildings are relatively close together. But those surprises are always enjoyable.